Good morning, everybody. Tonight we have with us the Reverend Billy James Hargis, who is the founder of the Church of the Christian Crusade, and he'll be with us for the hour. He is a man who has had a spectacular evangelistic past, a controversial past, and we'll be discussing with him tonight the fact that he was pastor of a church at the age of 20. He had can you say career about an evangelist? Is that fair? We'll ask him when he comes out here. I don't know if you say evangelists like Billy Graham or Reverend Hargis or Oral Roberts have careers. A very interesting man, though. He's had some tough moments in the past couple of years, and he'll be out here in just a few moments. Last night here, I was talking about the fact with Senator Hayakawa that we had interviewed a lot of people on this show, and he mentioned at one time that he had interviewed Mahalia Jackson, and I did the same thing, and it was a dumb thing to do. I meant to refer to Marian Anderson, who we had on the show in New York, and I said Mahalia Jackson. I received a lovely telegram today from the Reverend Richard R. Hicks, a United Methodist chaplain, calling it to my attention. And he said it's unfortunate that from time to time I demonstrate an affinity for making unfounded statements. That one was not unfounded, sir and ladies and gentlemen. I just had a memory blank here, and I was thinking of Marian Anderson. He said we had Mahalia Jackson on the program, and of course she died before we started, and that wasn't possible, and if I have offended anybody with that, I apologize for it. Tomorrow night here we have a gentleman from the state of Alabama who is the Attorney General down there with Governor George Wallace. He has been called the toughest politician in the South since Huey Long of Louisiana. He is a man who may soon announce his candidacy for the governorship of Alabama. He recently obtained a first-degree murder conviction for a one-time member of the KKK. Then on Thursday, we have Midge Constanza, President Carter's assistant for public liaison, and Louise Legue. Not Louise Legg, but Louise Legue will be here from the Washington Star's gossip column, which is called The Ear. And I want to talk to her about some misinformation which they printed about myself in this show on one occasion. And they did correct it later, I have to say that. But I wonder how sometimes in these gossip columns or magazines they print things that are totally at odds with the facts. And maybe Miss Legue, Mrs. Legue, Ms. Legue. We'll feel about that when she joins us on Thursday night. I wanted to say one other thing about Christmas last night, and I didn't have a chance to. Why can't the people who make candles get in concert with the people who make candlesticks or holders and make them the same size so you don't have to shave them off or melt wax into the candlestick or stuff them with aluminum foil and the candle's like this, you know, dripping on the piano? It's simple, right? I mean, all light bulbs are the same size, standard light bulbs. Please get together, those people who make candlesticks and those who make candles, because it's terribly frustrating to stand there at a dinner table with a, what do you say, at the end of a candle, but letting wax drip in and then it yucks all over the place. And it just seems to me a very, very simple idea. In fact, I think I'll bring out Snyder's coordinated candlesticks and candles and get the hell out of here and quit doing, quit doing this. Tomorrow night we'll show you members of our staff who have grown hair on their faces over the Christmas holidays. Everybody's growing beards and mustaches around here. It's crazy. Right back with the Reverend Billy James Hargis after these words from our sponsors, as tomorrow begins from Los Angeles after these messages. Now here's a gentleman you don't see often on television interview programs, Dr. Billy James Hargis, who is founder and leader of the Church of the Christian Crusade and other influential religious organizations in this and 31 other countries. Dr. Hargis is a radio and television evangelist who describes himself as a communist-fighting right-winger. He is one of the most powerful conservative figures in this country, despite a much-publicized incident several years ago that nearly ended his career. Here now on television for the first time in 3 years from Tulsa, Oklahoma, is Billy James Hargis. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you.
I was grappling with myself here about describing what you do as a career. Is that the proper term for an evangelist?
Of course it is. It's a career, sure. My career, of course, is not only as an evangelist, I'm also the founder and director of David Livingstone Missionary Foundation, which is a worldwide humanitarian organization, so I have a varied career, but it is a career. It's a cause. It's a career. We've given our lives to it.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you why you haven't been on television for 3 years.
Well,
I read that you have a mistrust of the media and the press.
Well, I do. I really do. I felt that over the years that I took a beating, and but in 1964 I had a stroke. I was in bed, in and out of bed for 1 year. When I came back, I'd put on 50 pounds, to be honest with you. I'd lived on my farm in the Ozark Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't willing to pay the price again, going back on television. However, we are now. We're starting again this spring. And we're also now, for the first time, buying some television properties. I'm excited about that. I'd like to buy 5 or 6 U's for religious programming.
Those are UHF television stations. That's terminology, the U's. You know, I'd like to buy 5 or 6 U's myself. Billy James.
Well, there's a lot of frequencies open.
Yeah, I know,
more than you think there are.
Yeah, but you see, I don't have the cash for that. I have a problem.
Now, come on,
there.
Tom.
No, I'm
don't
quite
give me that now. Neither do I. But you know, the bankers are my friends. I can borrow money.
Well, it seems that the bankers are real good friends with yourself and with other evangelists that we've had on this program. Rex Humbard, for example, and I've talked with Oral Roberts on other programs. And you fellas all seem to acquire a lot of media properties. Who's the fellow they call the Johnny Carson of evangelism?
No, Pat Robertson.
Pat Robertson.
Yeah,
he was here one time, and he's got his
own
own network and satellite transmissions going now.
It's a fantastic operation he has. Terrific idea.
Well, how come the bankers are more willing to loan you fellas money than they are most of the rest of us?
Well, I hate to answer because you've included yourself. You just say, why will they loan you more money than the average? Because we have a record of paying it back, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I know. For instance, the stations that we're now presently involved in negotiations with, it'll represent barred capital for me altogether. But we have a reputation of paying our bills, and I know you do too. That's ridiculous to even ask me that question. We're not in your league. But I do want to start some religious television stations, I really do. And I like this Pat Robertson, Jim Baker approach, where they have the Johnny Carson type set, and they have one piece of music every 15 minutes, and they talk about religion, talk about current events. I like it, and I want to get in on that. The program with the name we've tentatively given our series this fall will be shown 3 nights a week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Be called Pray for America, where we will deal with issues, big issues of the hour for the first 45 minutes, and then we'll have a minister, a chaplain to come on and give the Bible
sermon or whatever you call it. I want to go back to your distrust, I guess, for media. When you say they've been rough on you, how have they been rough on you? How have they been beating up on you?
Well, for instance, back during the days, the producer of your program here's dad has written a book that I'm very appreciative of. He used to be head of CBS.
Fred Friendly.
Fred Friendly. A current book called The Good Guys, The Bad Guys, The First Amendment. And I think he tells my story there, and the reason for my mistrust of the media, better than I could ever relate it, was very simple. I was on President Kennedy's, and then President Johnson's, and then President Nixon's. I've had the privilege of being a non-political. I was on the hate list of all 3 of them, and they were taking away my freedoms and so forth, and I protested the media, and they didn't believe it. I said there was a conspiracy, that Walter Reuther had submitted a memorandum to President Kennedy and Attorney General Bobby Kennedy that I was to be gotten rid of. My name was there. We got a hold of a copy of the Reuther memorandum. A member of Attorney General Kennedy's office risked his job, photostat, and sent it to us. I made it public to the media, but the media nationally didn't even pay attention to it. Fred Friendly now in the book says this is all factual, that there was a conspiracy, 1, to revoke the tax-exempt status of my organization, to, quote, dam the flow of funds in my organization, and 2nd, to harass the radio stations that carried my program so that they would no longer carry the program. You know, it was one of my programs that resulted in the fairness doctrine. Now, we went all the way to the Supreme Court in both instances and lost. We went all the way to the Supreme Court for the right for a preacher to be anti-communist, use the state while I go communist fighting, and that scares me. You know, I think somebody's going to say, well, you mean he's a communist fighter? I'm an anti-communist fighter, but that doesn't make sense either. But I want to get it straight. I'm anti-communist. I'm not communist. And the point was that I feel that communism is a religious issue. I feel that Satan has chosen communism. I'm a fundamentalist to begin with. I'm Orthodox, evangelical. I believe the Bible literally.
Are you fire and brimstone?
I don't exactly
I mean,
know
is
what
there a hell with fire where those who sin without being forgiven will burn
in original
eternally?
sin. I believe in heaven. I believe in hell. I've never known what a Bible thumper is. That's a word that's the media uses that a lot, or what a hell and fire and brimstone preacher is. But I would assume that most of the priests and ministers of the United States still believe in their Orthodox teachings. Certainly I do. And I believe that Satan has chosen communism as a vehicle to usher in the tribulation period of the Battle of Armageddon. There were a lot of people that were not preachers that believed in Bible prophecy. General MacArthur referred to the Battle of Armageddon when he took the surrender of the Japanese. He said, if there's to be another war, I hope it's the Battle of Armageddon. Well, I believe there has to be a world system that brings about this age-old conflict between good and evil, and I think that system's communism. I think we're fighting a satanic thing. I don't think it's a political thing or a military opponent. I think it's a satanic thing, and this is what I felt. And so when they came to me and said, when you're fighting communism, it's political, purely political, and we're going to revoke your tax exempt status, I said, no, it isn't. It's what I believe. This is Bible prophecy and fulfillment. I believe the Bible is being fulfilled, that Satan has chosen communism to usher in the tribulation period, the Antichrist, the Battle of Armageddon. And that was the issue that went to the Supreme Court. Now remember, I won in all the lower courts where you had cross-examination and you brought in government witnesses and so forth, depositions. I won those litigations. I won that this was what I believed. This was my religious convictions, and I had as much right to be anti-communist in the name of Christ as a man had to be a communist in the name of Christ, or a socialist in the name of Christ. And then when it got all the way to the Supreme Court, they refused to review the negative decision of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver. But there's two books out now that I urge your viewers to get, neither one of which is written by anyone I know personally, except I've just met them as authors. One is Fred Friendly's book. The other is Victor Lasky's book on the Watergate affair. This has been one of the best-selling books recently, and it reviews the same story, how my freedom of speech was limited, how they revoked my tax-exempt status because my theology was not acceptable, how the news media refused to carry my story, and the news media wouldn't carry my story. I had the Ruther Memorandum. We had these
before
things.
you go on, Reverend Hargis, isn't it possible that the barons of the media in New York felt that Billy James Hargis was just another country preacher out in Oklahoma and
Which
really
I am.
not worthy of... Yeah, and
let's face it, I am. I live on a farm now. I came from East Texas. I am a farmer, and that's quite apparent, you know. Bill Buckley once referred to me as the Hillbilly Crusader. Well, okay, well and good. But Hillbilly Crusaders have opinions, too, under this great democratic system. We have a right to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand this under the democratic concept that only the establishment or the Eastern establishment has a right to be heard, that someone from the Midwest, from East Texas, Texarkana of all places, someone who lives on a farm in the Ozark Mountains, that he would have a credible viewpoint. But I had a viewpoint that meant a lot to me, and I was willing to risk my tax-exempt status, and I was willing to risk the loss of my radio and television stations in order to stand with what I believed, and I did. I lost my tax-exempt status. I must say, in all fairness, that after President Nixon came in and Mr. Connally became the Secretary of Treasury, they gave me tax-exempt status on some of the other foundations that I had started. So we're not presently having any problem, thank God, with the IRS or the FCC.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to the thing that you said, or the broadcast that you produced or wrote or whatever, that resulted in the fairness doctrine. For those who don't know, which was it?
Well, it was a network program where I had bought the time on all these radio stations, and the one that they particularly objected to was the WGCB in Red Lion, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of York, Pennsylvania. York, Pennsylvania is known as where they make the House of Windsor cigars and the Red Dot Sweet cigars and so forth, and also the old Zenith radio, the cedar cabinets they made back in radio days. And a preacher there, Presbyterian preacher, terrific guy, an old man by the name of John Norris. And he's the kind of stuff that made America in the beginning. He had a lot of guts about him. And he sold me that time. And I went on and I said that Fred J. Cook, said this was during the Goldwater came in, Goldwater versus Johnson. And I said that Fred J. Cook, incidentally, I've never told this before, this is a first. I didn't even write that script. I lifted everything I said from Bill Buckley's newspaper column. No one has ever said that before, but I'll tell you tonight. The thing that I said was word by word taken from Bill Buckley's syndicated newspaper column. No one has ever figured that out, but it's true. I didn't know that much about him. Honest to God, I didn't. I didn't know that much about him.
What were you talking about him for?
The simple reason that this man was being quoted in various magazines like The Nation and so forth, saying that J. Edgar Hoover, whom I admired very much, had railroaded Alger Hiss. I didn't like that. Saying that Goldwater was somehow linked with the Nazis in Germany. You remember that charge, that there was money coming from the Nazis in Germany in the Goldwater campaign. I got tired of it. And I didn't know anything about Fred J. Cook. I never met Fred J. Cook. And I saw, what is Buckley's magazine called, National Review?
Saturday Review.
Saturday Review or National Review?
Or is it the
National Review? I think it's National Review. And I saw this little article. You know, he runs these little short editorials, one or two paragraphs. And he was put very succinctly, summarily there. And so I read the thing. No one, until this day, and this has been here 20 years ago, ever figured out that I didn't write that. So I read that on the radio. So all of a sudden, Fred J. Cook contacted Reverend Norris there in Red Lion, Pennsylvania, and demanded equal time, but he didn't want to pay for it. So Reverend Norris said, hey, look, Hargis paid for the time. I think it was $12.75. He said, you pay $12.75, you can say anything you want to say. And that was the issue. And he said, or if you will sign a poverty oath that you can't afford to pay for it, we'll give you the time. Well, he wouldn't do that. And, of course, in Fred Friendly's book on the good guys, the bad guys, and the First Amendment, he proves that the Democrat National Committee put Fred Cook up to this and financed the whole thing. The fight that began with protest to my program, that went all the way to the Supreme Court, was actually being funded through a front with tax-exempt status. Now, here the President of the United States and the Attorney General were using a tax-exempt foundation called the National Council for Civic Responsibility, I think is what it's called, so that rich liberals could funnel their money in there, get tax-exempt status. The National Democrat Party Committee itself was funneling money into it, and the whole thing, I was a test case. Went to the Supreme Court, and I lost.
The fact of the matter is, you never should have subscribed to the National Review.
No, I don't object to that. What are you talking about?
I mean, you read a paragraph out of the National Review, and look what happened to you.
What greater honor could there be than my kids, I've got 4 kids, incidentally one of them married in 1977, so I got 1 married child. What great honor is that they can say that their dad stood up for freedom of speech and went all the way to the Supreme Court, and maybe that's the only contribution I'll make to life, but I'm proud of it.
I got something I'm not dying to ask you, but I really want to ask you, but I have to stop for these words from our NBC stations. We'll continue with Billy James Hargis from Los Angeles after this. This follows right up with the Red Lion decision that you were talking about from Friendly's book. We pay great homage in this country to the sacred principle of the separation of church and state. Here we have a minister, Billy James Hargis, who, along with other ministers, goes on radio and television stations and discusses purely political issues.
No. Now, Tom, I can't agree with that. That's what the lawsuit was over.
Let me finish. And also discusses political personalities in this country, sometimes praising them, sometimes disparaging them. And the question arises, is that church business or is it state business?
Well, let me say this to you. President Johnson allowed me to speak out on political matters because when he was campaigning for the presidency, he called upon the ministers of the country to make their choice, and the president hopefully would be him, and to get out and endorse him. So I have no less an authority than President Johnson for having supported Senator Goldwater for the presidency, because he said get involved, so I got involved. But let me say this in all sincerity. I don't believe that separation of church and state has to do with separation of church and acts or legislation. I believe that separation, I do not believe it's separation of state and God, in other words, because in every one of our state constitutions is a reference to God, and all of our national laws is a reference to God. That doesn't mean that a man of the cloth, so-called, a priest, a minister. After all, Norman Thomas, who headed the Socialist Party for the last 2 decades of his life, was a Presbyterian preacher. If you were to take a William Jennings Bryan, who was the head of the Democrat Party, was some sort of a preacher. Preachers have always been involved in the political process in this country, and I think they rightfully should be. What I was saying was that if a minister came out on these liberal political viewpoints or I'd say in support of Johnson. Didn't I have a right to come out and support a Goldwater if I wanted to? Now, I must tell you in all honesty that I was scared something like this was going to happen, because I knew I was, one of the national magazines said there was only 3 nationally known preachers that supported Goldwater. One of them was Peel, one was me. And so knowing that this might happen, I never did publicly endorse him. First place, I didn't want to hurt him. I might have more enemies than I got friends, you know. You remember that old adage? You want, how do you want me to help you? Endorse you, not endorse you, know. So the point is that I was careful not to endorse him. However, in my heart, I was praying night and day for the election of Barry Goldwater, whom I admired very much. But I'm not asking preachers not to speak out on political issues. Tom, let the liberals speak out, but for God's sake, let the conservatives speak out too. Don't deny us our freedom of speech. That's all I'm saying. If the liberals of the world have a right to speak out on everything from civil rights to pacifism to name it, then the conservatives have got a right to speak out on.
But the liberals usually make their statements about civil rights or human rights or whatever from the pulpit, as opposed to the conservative preachers who usually have radio networks and television stations. Name for me one liberal preacher in this country who's got a radio and television set up.
You know why? Because their viewpoints are so unpopular they can't get popular support. And that's God's truth. You see, it's the marketplace still. Why are you sitting on this show tonight and probably moving into the top spot of NBC News? I hope you do. I'm a booster of yours.
Flattery will not.
Well, I don't care whether it gets anywhere or not. I still hope that you make it. I mean, I can read TV Guide. Hey. I read the story in TV Guide, and I'm all for it.
Like Goldwater said, save your endorsement.
Okay, save my endorsement. Okay, all right. I'm sorry. Can we edit this out?
I'm only kidding.
Can we edit this out?
We don't edit a thing out here. It's an honest show. Go ahead.
But let's see. What are we talking about before we got involved?
We're talking about the fact that you say the liberal position is so unpopular.
Oh, yes. Okay, I've always said in my own mind, the reason that a liberal does not take his cynicism, his near agnosticism to the radio, nobody'd support it. It's not a cause that gets people emotionally involved. It's not a cause that'll make them sacrifice. But you take a Rex Humbard or a Billy Graham or an Oral Roberts, put them on radio or television, there's people that will sacrifice for that cause. Also, you've had Carl McIntyre on this program.
Yes, we have.
I mean, he's done a remarkable job. And people will support his cause. They'll support Robert Schuler's cause. Any of the so-called evangelical, fundamentalist, orthodox, right-wing, they'll support these people because they do something to them emotionally. But liberalism leaves you dead fish. Nobody's going to sacrifice for liberalism. That's why the organizations that were started, that's mentioned in Fred Friendly's book, Good Guys, Bad Guys, and the First Amendment. That's why every one of those organizations went defunct. They all went bankrupt because the liberals don't support liberal causes, except in talk. Liberals are a bunch of talk. They talk, but they're parlor pinks, as they used to say back in the Depression days. They talk a good fight, but they don't put their money where their mouth is.
Well, but you talk too. I mean, there's a lot of conservative chatter. Yeah, there's a lot of conservative chatter in this country about we've got to stop the communists, and we've got to keep the Panama Canal, and we've got to stop all the welfare, and we've got to get the schools back. There's a lot of conservative chatter that really is what you call
thank God for it. We need
where's the great conservative action in this country today? Where is it?
I'd like to know, too. Isn't it disgusting?
I mean, for all the support that you get and others get, where is the great conservative action in this country?
Well, I can say this. You know how I feel about that? I honestly feel that the world is not going to get better and better because, I'm a fundamentalist. I believe the Bible. I believe there will be a conflict between good and evil. I believe there will be a battle of Armageddon. I believe there will be a tribulation period. And so consequently, I don't think that the conservative cause is going to triumph at all. At first, the communists tried to take over the country by appealing to labor people, you know, the old workers of the world unite thing. But the thing they forgot that when you give a poor man a living and a decent wage, he becomes middle class, and he's not going to fight the system. He became the system. Then the communists got behind the revolutionary youth. They said, well, we'll tear down the country with the marching kids. Well, the kids got married and started having babies and had to get jobs.
Oh, where were the communists behind the kids who were marching in the 1960s?
Oh, well, you don't believe in any of the congressional testimonies? There were all kinds of congressional hearings that said that the communists, if they didn't instigate it, they were exploiting it for their own purposes.
Do you think
I don't think you will deny they exploited it.
Oh, how did they exploit it? How did they exploit that? I mean, do you think for a single second that in the Kremlin they have an office which says this is the office by which we control and exploit American student demonstrators?
You know, I do.
I don't.
I do.
I don't.
That's what makes it America.
I just don't.
This country is so big and so wonderful. Tom Snyder can believe there's not an organized conspiracy. And poor little old hillbilly preacher from the Ozarks, Bill James Hargis.
Yeah, with his 7 TV stations.
Billy James Hargis can believe that there is an organized conspiracy. And I do believe there's an organized conspiracy, and I believe it's satanic. I believe with all my heart. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Fighting communism is not popular anymore. I can hardly finance my 150 radio stations carry my broadcast. They don't pay me to go on the air. I pay them to go on the air. You understand? And brother, I can hardly finance the Christian Crusade Weekly because fighting communism is not popular anymore. It's not popular anymore at all. There was a time, you remember, prior to Goldwater, when everybody was in the anti-communist fight. Governor Reagan was making anti-communist films, and everybody was in the thing.
And we had people out of work because they were suspected of being in organizations, and we had people under suspicion because they were...
I was under suspicion because I was a conservative by the President of the United States. I was on his hate list. They recently, when they demanded that they reveal all these
why do we have
papers,
positions in this country which are so extreme, be it liberal or conservative, that each side has hate lists of people that they want to keep off the air?
I don't have a hate list. You know what? If I've learned anything, I am not going to fight an individual. I really am not. So help me God. That's a promise before God. I'm not going to fight an individual. I'm going to fight an idea, atheism, anti-Americanism, communism, which I think is satanic. I'll fight that idea, but I'm not going to fight individuals.
What about these right-wing dictators around the world? Do you fight them too? The people who engage in torture and deny people their human rights? Are you against them as well?
And which ones are we going to talk about?
Well, what about the ones, for example, I don't know the fellow's name down in Brazil, but I read articles that torture is still a way of life in Brazil, that in Chile there's torture. That
now, wait just a minute. Now, are we saying that the government...
And what about Trujillo?
Oh, come on. Trujillo, he was a buffoon. He was a Charlie Chaplin-type comedian. The time I interviewed him, I remember the grease spot on his vest. That's the only thing I remember about him. I've made it my business to try to meet the world leaders. I don't have a vest. I don't have a grease spot on. Okay. I want you to know I cleaned up tonight. You know? I want you to know. I also want your audience to know that you offered me a bar of soap before we went on the air tonight.
Well, I offered you a glass of water, and you said I don't want that. I said a bar of soap. Now, do you mean to tell me that communism is so satanic that it represents Satan's way?
I believe it's a satanic system to bring
on the Battle of Armageddon, that you will not watch the Olympics from Moscow on NBC in 1980?
Have I said anything about the Olympics from Moscow?
No, but they're being held in the capital of Satanism.
I think it's a shame, and I don't know what's going to come out of that. One, I'm not even certain that there won't be a hue and cry coming from the American people that will... There's no telling what could happen to the Olympics. It's a long time away. I know this from what I've read, TV Guide and so forth. They say that the communists have demanded so much time to talk about the glory of the Soviet life, and I don't think American people are going to take that. Now, how they're going to protest, I don't know.
They're not going to get on there and talk about the glory. Wait, before we go any further.
No, they've said
let me do a little capitalism here. I got sponsors.
Hey,
we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. So anyway, now let's go back to the
threat of communism.
I want to say just one thing here. Now we look at I had some people in here the other night who ran the Soviet exhibit at the Los Angeles Convention Hall, and they were charming, wonderful people. They're communists. They believe in their...
They'd be fools not to be.
Yeah, except that I said to this one man here, who obviously was one of the officials or head men in the delegation. I said, you people talk to us about communism and sharing. I said, you got $85 million from NBC. You conducted a capitalistic bidding war with the 3 television networks in this country to see who you could get the most money from. That's not communism, that's capitalism. And well, he didn't have any. He started to laugh. He says, that's only the beginning. Wait till 1980, see how much more we're going to get. And I'm for that. I want them to be successful, because as they're successful, the less trouble they're going to make for all of us.
I think I'd be lying if I said I'm for that, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't ship that fancy 100-proof vodka over here by the case free. I mean, they charge good cash money for it, so...
I think the greatest threat from communism, I'll be honest with you, is military threat. I do really believe that we are more or less unilaterally disarming while they're arming. I do believe all of those congressional reports that show that they are still in the armaments race and that they are getting ahead of us. And I'm concerned when I read, like this weekend, that President Carter has cut $1 billion off the military budget. It's going to hurt the Navy. And then today he cancels out the manufacture of some nuclear weapon. I don't believe we can trust the communists. I know we can't trust the communists. I don't think they intend any longer to overthrow us from within. I think they'll do it militarily if they do it at all. And I think they are an ever-present threat. For instance, just in this super ICBM area alone, we have never built a 6-MIRVed super ICBM. When U.S. News and World Report says they have 300, I can't hardly believe in their peace resolves when they're out here building these super ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles that are 6-MIRV that can devastate 6 American cities with one missile launching. I don't think that we're properly concerned about the military threat of communism. I believe that with all my heart.
But then why don't you run for political office and get that kind of thinking into the halls of Congress in Washington?
Well, because I'm not a lawyer. I have no legal background.
You don't have to be a lawyer.
I'm a hillbilly preacher, as you pointed out.
There have been a lot of hillbillies and hillbilly preachers who've run for political office. But I've heard you and other gentlemen on the air who second-guessed the Congress, who pot-shot the president. McIntyre used to do it on WXUR in Media, Pennsylvania. I thought, well, if these guys are so smart, why don't they put themselves before the electorate and present their opinions to us, and if we go along, we'll vote for them.
All right, one, I am putting myself before the electorate. You see, if these people hear my viewpoint, do not want to support me, they don't have to. And if they don't support me, I'm through, right? So I am putting my whole life's at stake. If they don't believe in what I'm saying, they won't support me, and I'm out of business. Mm-hmm. And so the point is, I am putting myself before the electorate. Second, I am not qualified to run for any political office. I've got 1.5 years of college. I was a poor kid out of East Texas with 1.5 years of college. And all of that's Bible college. All I know is the Word of God, the Bible, and I believe the Lord did give me an ability to discern contemporary things. I really feel like I've got a feeling for the news.
Yeah, but you talk very knowledgeably about MIRVs, about missile systems, about political systems.
I read a lot,
so you read
and
a lot.
I listen to the Tomorrow Show.
Yeah. Here he goes again. Let me stop for these words from our NBC stations. We'll continue with Billy James Hargis after this. Tell what you were telling me in the commercial. Yeah, we're back.
I had I'd just like to share with you two experiences. I was talking to one of the members of your staff today, and they said, anything ever funny happened to you? And I realized all of a sudden nothing ever funny ever happened to me. Everything's been serious.
It hasn't been a lot of chuckles the last couple of years.
It hasn't been a lot of chuckles, But I did think of something where a fellow conned me, and yet it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life. Two very outstanding things happened the last 4 years. One, I honestly believe that God healed me. I had a stroke in September 1974. I never believed this before. I didn't believe in divine healers. I listened to all that. I didn't disbelieve, but it never happened to me. And I came from a church that didn't emphasize that, see? But one night, I thought I was dying, and I went out on my hill on the Rose of Sharon farm in the Ozarks, and I said, God, either kill me or heal me. And my wife, my son, who were there with me, believes that during that night, God healed me. And I haven't had a pain since then. I haven't had a chest pain. The hiatal hernia left, the whole bit. Mm-hmm. And I'd been in bed. But then
you know, there are some people who think you never had those sicknesses.
Well,
you used it as a dodge for the trouble.
Well, then I would suggest that they contact the medical doctor that treated me during that period, Dr. Philip Joseph of Sapulpa, Oklahoma, a suburb of Tulsa.
Mm-hmm. And what was the
And I know that I had it. I know the pain, okay? But the second thing was, a year ago, at the end of the year, we had a tremendous radio publication debt of almost $2 million. My wife and I were having our 25th wedding anniversary. I can't believe it happened, but actually this contract played against me turned my whole life around. This guy showed up one day in the midst of the Friday before our our 25th anniversary celebration. And he comes in, he has on cowboy boots, a cowboy hat, but I've lived among eccentric Westerners all my life, and it's not the good dressed guys that's got the money, it's the poorly dressed guys in the Ozarks and in Oklahoma and Texas got the money. So I believe what he said. He said, I have come to transfer $2 million to your Christian Crusade account next Monday, 10 o'clock Monday morning.
Hallelujah.
And so, you know, Cecil Todd, the famous evangelist, was visiting me. Dr. Larry Ward, President Food for the Hungry, Glendale, was visiting me. Dr. Al Stack. I got him in a prayer meeting. We just praised God and thanked God this man was giving us $2 million. And believe me, I got my banker out there to meet him. I got my lawyers out there to meet him. We got everything set up. And on Monday morning, the guy, he had gone. Over the weekend, he was gone. And we had entertained him, put him through the hotel a whole bit. But that thing turned me around. It turned me around because up until that time, I was facing the 25th anniversary of our marriage. I was facing Christmas with despair and despondency. And I really believed that God had done this, that God had given us this $2 million. And I was so happy that weekend. I didn't have a care. The 25th anniversary was beautiful. The Sunday before Christmas services were beautiful and everything. And that whole thing changed my whole outlook on life. That guy, we later found, it was interesting, he got his Social Security pension. He lived in Eureka, California. And he got his Social Security, and he planned this thing. He's supposed to be mentally off, but the man who could do this wasn't mentally off because it was just too clever to fool bankers and to fool lawyers and the whole bit. So he took his Social Security check and bought a round-trip ticket from Eureka, California to Tulsa. He goes first to see Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts is too smart and he won't talk to him. But I'm so desperate, you know. To me, this was just an act of God. This man was going to do this
The Lord
thing.
giveth, the Lord taketh away.
So he took away. But the thing was, the thing that tickles me now is on Monday afternoon, this old age pensioner is up there in a mental hospital in Eureka, California, laughing about the weekend that I gave him, the suite of rooms, the chauffeur-driven cars. He had had a ball, boy. But you know what he did? He made my Christmas. He made my Christmas. The whole burden was lifted. God uses peculiar ways, but
indeed.
He worked even
strange indeed. You know, God works in strange ways, but he gets the job done.
Gets the job done.
What I mean?
Gets the job done.
Now listen, I would be remiss if I did not ask you about the trouble. Now, I know that there's litigation pending on that. There are things you can say and that you can't say. But some very serious charges were leveled against you involving immoral actions by students at a university. Where does that stand now?
Well, let me say this to you. I have, was in the press.
It was in Time Magazine.
Time Magazine in the press last year. My answers were there. And I really, as far as I'm concerned, it's behind me. I can only say this, that I believe with all of my heart that our work is growing, that God is blessing our work, it's prospering. And what I did or what I didn't do, God has forgiven me. And at the time, I felt the charges were unfair, but in all sincerity, I'm sure I've done things far worse than I've ever been accused of. We've all sinned, come short of the glory of God. I went through a period of emotional distress. It was the most traumatic experience of my life, but it's behind now. It's behind. I've got a job to do, and I have nothing else to say.
I understand that, but I want to ask you one more thing. Considering that problem, and whatever happened, as you say, is past, after it was all over, now do you have a little bit more flexibility in your, how can I say this?
May I say it for you?
Yeah.
I'm more sensitive to people that are being accused falsely or truthfully.
But I mean, when you stand and you preach the Bible, can you now understand the plight of sinners more than you had been able to before?
I can. I say yes. And I say to you in all sincerity, if this experience has done anything to me, it's made me realize that the Christians are the only army in the world that kill their wounded. Everybody else binds the wounds of their wounded and helps them. But the Christians are quick to believe whatever they hear without hearing the other side. I can only say to you this, I hope and pray to God that I will never in my life attack a man on such charges, whether they're true or they're false, because I know the hurt that comes from it. Not just the hurt to him, but everybody that loves him. What about my wife? What about my 4 kids? What about my ministry? I am more sensitive now. I really am. I really am. I wrote this, well, we weren't going to talk about that, but I've got a book out now called The Depth Principle, in which I said that there's 3 things that you've got to have peace of mind. I never thought about these spiritual details before. One is you've got to have a knowledge that your sins are forgiven. You've got to be reasonably sure that there's nothing between you and God that's wrong. Second, you've got to be right in your attitude towards others. You've got to love someone, be loved by somebody. You've got to be able to communicate with somebody. And third, you've got to be right in your attitude towards yourself. You've got to forgive yourself, and you have got to forget the things of the past. You've got to move forward. What good is it going to do for me to talk the rest of my life about charges that may or may not have been proven true? I said what I had to do and what I had to say in the press, but I guarantee you one thing. I know now that we Christians are amiss in being merciful to folks who have problems. I confess I was.
We'll continue with Billy James Hargis after these words from our sponsors. What I was trying to ask you, and we solved it in the commercial, was that after that experience that you had, and the charge is true or untrue, you have more compassion now.
I sure do.
And you don't want to kill the wounded
no,
Christians.
I certainly don't.
But you did at one time.
At one time, I think I was totally unfair.
What is it about Christianity?
You have to learn, you know. You see, I'm 52 years old now. You start out as a young Turk, you know, you're going to turn the world around. I haven't changed my viewpoint that Christianity is the true religion, that there's one God, that Jesus is the Savior of the world. I haven't changed my viewpoint the Bible's inspired, that Christ is coming back, the value of the new birth. I haven't changed my viewpoint that America's the greatest country in the world, free economics is the best expression of biblical economy. I haven't changed my viewpoint at all. I just hope and pray to God I'm more tolerant of people who disagree with me, and that I don't go out and try to mow them down, you see. Because especially people, I have a feeling now towards people who are without friends. You know, I kept the list of the people who called me the year that I thought I was dying on my farm in the Ozarks. Because I want to pray for those people, remember those people as long as I live, the people that called me. And it's amazing how many people have been my friends, that took my handouts, that took my gifts, that took my money, that never even bothered to call me, let alone write a card. They believed whatever Time magazine said. And I will never forget the people who stayed with me. And the interesting thing is that there were people that I had written articles against Tom Snyder, and people that I opposed that called me on the telephone and said, "Say, do you need a buck? Is there anything we can do for you?" I've learned a lot. It's still all up here. You know, but it's going to get straightened out someday. Because I'm trying now to know God and to know myself, and I'm trying to understand the Scriptures, and that's why I wrote this book, The Depth Principle. Because I don't believe I was talking a lot about God, but I wondered to what extent I really knew God, and to what extent I was really serving God.
And to what extent...
I want to do what I believe in, but I've got to do it God's way and not my way, and that's what I'm striving to do. And I'm not going to hurt innocent people. So help me God, I'd rather stop today than to hurt innocent people. And I mean that.
On the lighter side, since we're nearing the end of our time here, in that same article in Time magazine, it was reported that you had asked the Tulsa City Council for permission to erect your name in 5-foot-high lights on the top of some building. I thought to myself, what kind of a guy wants his name in letters 5 feet tall?
We had bought
I got a minute left. You understand?
Okay, we had 10 or 12, I don't know, 8, 10 or 12-story building, and we wanted to put a sign on Bill James Hargis Ministries on top of the building, so when people came down this interstate, they'd know that was our headquarters. They didn't allow us to do it. I'm glad they didn't. I would have seen my name in 5-foot signs on top of an 8 or 10-story building. Tom, you know, you honored me by asking me to come on your first show that you ever did, and that was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad I got to meet you at last, and I mean that very sincerely. And I'm glad that I selected this as my debut again. Is that what this is, a debut?
This is your debut
Thank you
here.
for letting me be with you.
And I want you to know that there are some people who'll be extremely disappointed that I didn't really lash it out of you tonight. But I don't do business that way. That's a bad way to do business.
You've been very kind,
well,
and I appreciate it. And for my little daughter, Brenda, the autographed picture,
you'll
please.
have it. And I'll even fix the watch you gave your kid that didn't work.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Well, Uri Geller, I just put it right here at Run. We'll be right back after these announcements.